Hey, I'm Marissa, we've got a busy weekend of Raptors basketball coming right up. Yesterday we had Josh on to talk about Vince Carter, and we will have more on him later in the show. But first, tonight's game when LeBron and the Lakers pay a visit. Now, Toronto is still stomaching the Scottie Barnes news, which puts them at a bigger disadvantage when their all-time nemesis comes to town. In his regular season career against the Raps, LeBron is averaging 27, 7, and 7, which is pretty standard fare. We all know King James saves his best for the playoffs, which is something that these Raps probably don't have to think about. Toronto is 1-4 with losses piling up alongside all those injuries. They've been short-handed since opening night, and that trend isn't going to change anytime soon. This is the first of a back-to-back for the Raps, with Sacramento on deck Saturday. Then things get really tricky as Toronto heads out west for a 5-game road trip. In all, they played 10 of 13 games on the road, following tomorrow night's game with the Kings. But first, tonight's matchup with the King. And if dealing with LeBron isn't enough, Anthony Davis will be a handful for the Raps. He's been a terror in 5 games this season, averaging 30 points per game, along with 12 boards and a couple blocks. FanDuel even has AD creeping into the MVP discussion. And if he's going to carry the scoring load in LA, you could do a lot worse. You can catch tonight's game between the Lakers and Raps on TSN. Coverage begins at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. Time now for the CFL Preview powered by FanDuel. The playoffs are here, and our friends at FanDuel have really expanded some player prop markets, specifically when it comes to big plays. In the East, FanDuel likes the Argos to have a big day on offense against the Red Blacks, which makes sense because they hung 38 points on Ottawa 2 weeks ago, a game where Chad Kelly threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. We cannot count Ottawa out though. Receivers Khalil Pimbleton and Justin Hardy were both in the top 3 in receiving yards per game this season. But if you're betting moneyline, it's worth noting that Toronto is 7-2 at home this year, and Ottawa went 2-7 on the road. In the West, the Lions are in Saski to take on the Rough Riders. BC has major offensive threats on their roster, so FanDuel is counting on some pretty explosive plays on their side. The Riders have played well against the Lions this season, and beat them by 30 a couple weeks ago in Regina. Because they're home again tomorrow, it's no surprise they come in as the favorites. You can watch both playoff games Saturday on TSN. The Red Blacks and Argos get things started at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, followed by the Lions and Riders at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. So for my Saski babies, that's 4:30. Gotta cater to my Saski babies. Time now for Eminems Huddle Up, so let's huddle up with our home team and take a look at Sunday's game between the Dolphins and Bills. And today we're joined by our guy and resident Fins fan, Thomas Pockernick. Pock, how's it going?
Yeah, Marissa, I'm pretty nervous for this weekend's game, I'm not gonna lie, but thanks for having me on the show today.
I mean, yeah, you should be, but you're welcome. Okay, Pock, as we mentioned off the top, your Fins have a big game against the Bills this weekend. Can you give us a first-hand account as to how Miami fans feel about Josh Allen?
How Miami fans feel about Josh Allen? Oh boy, what a question. If you look up on Google the owner of the Miami Dolphins, it'll come up and say Stephen Ross, but I think all Dolphins fans do know that our true owner is Josh Allen, because I don't think a player dominates another franchise in all of sports right now quite like Josh Allen dominates the Miami Dolphins. In 13 career games, he's got an MVP type season of statistics, 34 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 11 wins, 2 losses, and those 2 losses, one he had over 400 total yards, and in the other one was his first ever game against the Dolphins. So he has just owned us in his entire career and has been so dominant, and I think it's fitting that as soon as Brady leaves, a new player comes in and just brings misery to all of Miami Dolphins Nation.
And speaking of QBs, Tua returned last week against the Cardinals. Now, we are really hoping he stays healthy. What is the expectation for the rest of the year for the Fins?
I know I gave a bit of a bleak answer when discussing this week's game against the Bills, but when you talk about Tua returning, I think the expectation has to be that you make something of the season. This is a team that came into the year with big playoff aspirations, potentially winning a playoff game, making a run at an AFC championship, at a Super Bowl, because when Tua has been healthy, he has played quarterback at a very high level and gotten a ton of results for this Dolphins team. So yes, the hope is that he can stay on the field, but it is also much more than that, because he's now getting paid top dollar among quarterbacks, and the expectation is with the weapons around him, they can win big games down the stretch. They're chasing with a 2-5 record, but hopefully at some point, and maybe that doesn't start this week against the Bills, they can get things going and start stacking W's.
Wow, we start a little negative, then switch to positive. We have so many amazing emotions on this show. Okay, Pock, I see those M&Ms in front of you, buddy. I'm wondering how I can get myself some of those free bags.
Marissa, I'll tell you this. If the Dolphins win this weekend, I will hand deliver you as many M&Ms as you want, because I will be in such a good mood. But right now, M&Ms is offering 1 month of TSN Plus with the purchase of any participating product. And you can find out more at marscontest.ca/rules.
Thanks, Pock.
Thank you.
You can catch the Dolphins and Bills Sunday on CTV. Coverage begins at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Time now for one of my newer favorite segments. It's Issers Rankings. We mentioned earlier in the show that we'd have more on Vince Carter's jersey retirement. So there's no better time than now that my top 5 Carter plays. Let's start off with a bang, Vince's rookie year facing the Cavs. Gets free for a 360, T-Mac with the pass. Raps fans can't help but think about what could have been. That was one of many bangers from his first year. How about this one on the late great Dikembe Mutombo? It seems like he just kept getting higher and higher. Number 3, Vince takes off against the Pistons. And he hammers one on Ben Wallace. That is one of the greatest defenders of all time. Who didn't Vince put on a poster? Okay, now, number 2. There's this one in Indiana, the double pump reverse two-hander. Vince had one of the most prolific rookie seasons in NBA history, didn't he? And my number 1, how about this iconic alley-oop? Vince soars for the lob from D. Brown. And you might not remember, but Carter also hit the game winner in that one. Again, no matter how you feel about Vince Carter, if you are Raptors fans, we cannot deny his greatness and the things that he did while he was here. I get it. I understand the bittersweet. I understand. But hopefully we all enjoy Saturday, yeah? And remember, you can see Vince get his number retired tomorrow on TSN. And hey, feel free to stick around for the game against the Kings as well. We've got you covered beginning at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. To F1 where things are really starting to heat up. On Sunday, we've got the Brazilian Grand Prix, and I know the perfect guy to come give us a little primer. Hello, Timothy.
Well, look who it is. If it isn't Marissa, fancy meeting you here.
I'll allow it. All right, Max Verstappen's lead in the driver's standing is down to just 47 points. And there's some controversy surrounding him and the runner-up, Lando Norris. Do you want to walk us through that?
Look, with any driver's championship battle, there's always going to be controversy. The big thing here is with how Max Verstappen is racing Lando Norris. Verstappen does such a good job of racing within that gray area, puts a lot of pressure on the FIA stewards to make a decision whether or not to penalize him or not penalize him. If you go all the way back to Mexico, Verstappen was handed 2 10-second time penalties, which ruined his race, but it didn't ruin Lando Norris's because he was able to take a big bite out of Verstappen's championship lead. Now, these two off the track are actually really good friends, but recently they haven't really been talking. And you know what? That's natural when it comes to these things. It's like any other major sport where two rivals, two competitors are fighting each other for a championship. I think the biggest thing with all of this is now the stewards. With them getting involved in Mexico, they're now that third party. They're that third person in to officiate this battle between these two drivers. And if either one of them overstep or do the wrong thing or do something that's questionable, you can bet that either Red Bull Racing or McLaren are going to march down to the stewards and say, hey, in Mexico, you did this, so we expect you to do the same here.
Now, Charles Leclerc is third in the standings, but there's something big at stake for Ferrari here. Tim, how important is the team championship?
Look, with Ferrari, think of them as the Toronto Maple Leafs of Formula One, where they haven't won a constructor's title in a really long time. It's been since 2008, so a very long time for Formula One when you're one of the top teams in this constructor's championship. With Ferrari, if you go back to Monza, they brought a new floor for their race car. And it's been an inconsistent season for Ferrari. And that new floor, that update, really smoothed things out for their car, made things a lot more consistent, gave the drivers a lot of confidence. And now you can see the drivers being able to extract the performance from the race car. They looked incredible at the U.S. Grand Prix. Again, Carlos Sainz was magnificent in Mexico, and now they've leapfrogged Red Bull in the constructors' standings. They're now second, and they're chasing McLaren for this constructors' title. And remember, with this constructors' championship standings, there is hundreds of millions of dollars involved when it comes to it.
Always a pleasure, Tim. Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks very much for having me, Marissa. Really appreciate it. And thanks to producer Jeremy as well.
Tim, you're always the best, man. No one else thanks me and the producer. Producer has a thankless job, you know? It's nice that he shouts him out. So shout out producer Jeremy. You can catch the Brazilian Grand Prix Sunday on TSN. Coverage begins at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 7:30 Pacific. This is a good sports weekend, okay? We got CFL, we got F1, we got NFL, please. We got all the stuff you need. That's it for me today. We'll see you back here Monday. Have a great weekend.